All right. Welcome, everybody. We are here to do the Heroes webinar on our pilot, our very first pilot of EMS, which took place in St. Louis. And I am joined by two folks who I have had truly the pleasure to get to know quite a bit in the last year or so, and I'm excited to introduce them. Before I do that, I do want to do a couple of logistics. First and foremost, today's session is being recorded, so we can share back with folks who are unable to join us today. Second of all, I do want to point, in case you have not had a chance to see that, but in the resources tab, there's a downloadable PDF for Heroes. You're welcome to access that if you have interest. And then the last thing is that we would love to hear from anybody who is attending. So there is both a chat feature and a Q&A feature here in Zoom. They're on the bottom scroll bar. Either one will work, but we would love to hear from you if you've got questions. And I know that our presenters today would much rather answer your questions than talk. So please don't hesitate to do that. We can stop at any time. So let me start by introducing our two presenters. I am actually going to read a little bit of their bio off a script because I want to get it right. First and foremost, Chief James Thompson is a respected leader in emergency medicine with over 2 decades of experience in public safety. As Chief of St. Louis Bureau of EMS, he has championed initiatives focused on workforce wellness, community trust, and excellence. Something I heard him say when I was there in September is we want to be nationally recognized, and he is working hard to make that happen, and they deserve that. He brings both strategic vision and frontline insights to his leadership, making him a powerful voice. Apparently, my dog would also like to join you in celebrating how great you are right now. And we're going to hear more about why he thought active bystandership would be helpful, so we'll get to that. Monte Chambers is a former police officer, which we won't hold against him here today because he's also used to work in EMS. He worked then in leadership and public safety, and he is now a full-time consultant and trainer focused on building safer, more supportive public safety organizations. Through his work with Monumental Access, Monte co-developed Heroes Active Bystandership Training for EMS, and now he's been helping us bring it. You've certainly helped us bring it in our St. Louis pilot, which we'll hear about today. And due to his unique dual background, he's really able to help us be a strategic partner in advancing this cultural change. And then a little bit, I am Abigail Tucker. I am one of the co-founders of Heroes. You can learn more about that on our website. But mostly, I'm excited to elevate talking about St. Louis Bureau of EMS. I do actually just want to share, I was there in September with both of these gentlemen. I was overwhelmed with how eager and excited your workforce was for this training. And for those of you who are joining us who don't even know what active bystandership training is, my quick elevator speech, but hopefully it'll become more obvious at the end of today, is active bystandership is the skill behind duty to intervene. We know that we're supposed to intervene when we see mistakes, when we see poor patient care, when we see misconduct. We know we're supposed to do something when we've got staff who are unhealthy and well, and we're supposed to intervene on that. But what psychology tells us is that's easier said than done. And active bystandership is the psychologically informed, skill build training to help give people the tools they need to do what's in their heart, to get back to the mission of the work and to do so in a healthier way. But Chief, I'd like to start with you. It's been such a joy getting to know you, and I've heard you answer this question, but I'd love for you to share with folks, what made you open to bringing this training to your department? You were an eager yes. What was behind that yes?
So one of the things I looked at is, we're a very young department. So I expect mistakes to be made. But what I was seeing is a lot of, well, I saw them doing it, but I didn't feel like it was my place to say something. And then there's some national issues that went down. We all are very familiar with the Elijah McClain case, where trained professionals stood there and watched their patient die. And I thought, there's got to be something that will give my employees tools to intervene in these situations. And that's what I really believe it's all about, is educating and giving your employees the tools to do the best job humanly possible. So when Monty first started talking about this, I was like, "Ooh, that sounds interesting." And Monty and I go back a long ways. He's always been a very good friend, and I always, I watched him come from a young man to where he is now. And I was listening to him, and I'm like, you know what, Monty? We desperately need something like that in EMS because there is nothing in my 34 years in EMS. I've never seen anything like it. So he obviously hooked me up with you. And once I learned the background behind this, I'm like, oh, we've got to have it. So that's where the initial excitement from me came in. And, this is absolutely going to help my department. Uh, and then I started kind of selling it a little bit to all my people, and they actually got more excited than me, which I'm like, okay, I'm going down the right path here. And, it was just absolutely incredible to watch some of the biggest naysayers on my department absolutely grab this and go, what took you so long to do this? Why didn't we have this before? There's a couple of them that were actually mad at me for not finding a program like this and bringing it here faster. But it was really neat to see the less enthused people that are now the champions of this project on my department. It absolutely was a turning point when we did the initial training. So uh, I can't wait. I've already been asked to roll it out to the entire fire department now. So we're going to have over 800 people in St. Louis trained in active bystanderism in the next 6 months.
Just so exciting, that eagerness. And to give people maybe a visual, when we did there's multiple ways that we roll out heroes to organizations. And one of our most traditional ways, which is what we did in St. Louis, is our train the trainer model. And that is, we're there for 3 whole days. Day one, they get the full 8-hour curriculum. Day two, for the agency instructors, they get teach back, prep, and practice. And day three, they are teaching it back in small groups. And for reference, where the chief is sitting right now is his office, and it is above the training room. And so I remember stopping out for lunch, just checking in with the chief. I'm like, so are you hearing anything? And he goes, are you kidding me? People are already coming up into my office to give me positive feedback. So that was pretty exciting and very affirming to hear for sure. Um, One of the things I'd love to get one follow up with you here, Chief, is that I think one of the things that you did a good job of in the train the trainer is making sure that we had a mix of different leaders. You really wanted it was important to you that you send the message to your department of, I'm going to make sure my leaders understand this and are on board with this so that it's a cultural buy-in. But you had a real diversity of people who maybe have been on the job less than a couple of years. People have been on the job for 20 years. Did you see any generational differences in their excitement or acceptance of the training?
Um, for the most part, it was universally accepted. Like I said, my older guys, my more seasoned people were typically more skeptical. But what's funny is it's the senior people that had the highest buy-in on it. But yeah, I looked throughout my bureau and I was like, okay, who do I have that I know can speak to people? Who can I get that's enthused about something? Not necessarily my senior guys or anything like that, but who do I have on my department that is my salesman? Who is the guy that's excited to train? It doesn't necessarily have to be, like the chief of EMS. I'm not doing it. This is for my guys. This is their thing. All I do is coordinate the chaos. Um, but yeah, the people I picked, I knew would be extremely excited and become advocates for that program. And I've got from 20 years to barely over a year experience as my instructors, and all of them are still 100% engaged. And everybody's asking me, "Hey, when's this going to kick off?" So
Right.
January 1st, the new year is going to be our big launch for everything.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's actually really helpful to hear because multi-generational workforces are a really common challenge that public safety and criminal justice have. And so to hear that a training universally cut through different generations, not just generations, but years of experience on the job.
Yeah.
Because certainly people with 20 years in the job, I often find that they might be a little bit more curmudgeon in the back like this, and they're
Oh, yeah.
not sure, but they come on real fast because they've had this experience of seeing what we're talking about. And they say, yeah, you know what? Monday morning quarterback, I wish I could go back in time and intervene differently. So they have those. Um, so Monty, I want to ask you a question for folks who don't know. Active bystandership has been around for decades. Dr. Irvin Staub is a world-renowned researcher who's brought us a lot of research about why people engage in harmful acts towards other humans and why they don't and why they intervene. Now, his work is really foundational in how we pull together our training, but it is newer in public safety. And it started out in New Orleans and then with ABLE, active bystandership for law enforcement. And they really, I think that's when you first found out about this. And then Heroes took it to fire and rescue, dispatch, EMS, and corrections. I'm kind of curious, like I know you were ABLE trained and you're an ABLE agency instructor. You really, actually, here's a real story. Monty pretty much in a very respectable way, like pulled me out and said, Abigail, you need to focus on EMS. Like they are hungry for this. So you must have had something in mind, like you knew ABLE, you knew we were trying to bridge the gap in public safety with Heroes. Like, what are the parallels? Like, why does everybody need this? But what really spoke to you about why we needed to bring this to EMS and then the larger fire and rescue scene?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Great to be here. Thank you, Chris. I think it's an amazing job that you're doing with City EMS right now. To your question, my background working as a police officer and working as an able instructor, it's like something immediately clicked with me because there are direct parallels as it relates to how we're all trying to mend the relationship with the communities that we serve. And so there's a lot of forward thinking that's happening in public safety to where the ideal of community policing is coming up in the conversation. But now in EMS, it's more of a community paramedicine and or a mobile integrated health system. So it's keeping the community focused and how is that we can offer a valuable training to those who are doing direct patient care. So it was an immediate click for me. So when we had that conversation several months back and we were discussing about ideas, I knew that EMS was probably going to be a healthy sweet spot. Because oftentimes in a lot of departments, especially that are fire-based EMS, oftentimes, EMS professionals, paramedics, and EMTs, we're kind of put off to the side just a little bit, even though we carry a majority of the load, as well as probably the revenue for a lot of fire departments. And there's no shot whatsoever to our firefighter brothers and sisters, but it just speaks more to the onsetness of needing quality training because of the type of patient care that we're actually involved in. And so to me, I think it's a natural transition to be able to include our EMS colleagues inside of this public safety umbrella of what you guys are doing, not only here with ABLE, but also with the Heroes Project at large.
That's great to hear. Yeah, and I think it's interesting, and maybe for a question for both of you, in one of the things that I learned when I was there was this experience that a lot of EMTs, paramedics, medics had with feeling like the forgotten arm of public safety and fire and rescue, and yet given their critical role in the whole process. And I'm curious around why would a culture like that really be excited to engage in active bystandership? Like, what about feeling forgotten by public safety helps you resonate with wanting to be trained and elevate your training?
That's a good question. Um, as far as the forgotten public safety workforce, I always explain to everybody EMS is the new kids on the block. I work for the second oldest fire department in the United States. We were formed in 1857 and have been continuously operating in the same city since then. EMS truly didn't come about until about 1970. So we are very young. Um, we're still determining what direction we are going. I think the greatest thing about being an EMS is the evolution of what we do now compared to what we did in 1970 or even when I started in the late 80s. Um, we're always looking at that expanded scope. And with an expanded scope, you're going to need more tools, more skills. Um, so with that, we're entering an era of a lot more diversity, a lot more cultural stuff, a lot more medical complexities. So the ability for my employees to effectively communicate between each other is more critical now than ever, especially when we're talking, especially in my system, a very high volume, high paced, going 100 miles an hour at all times. If you don't have that effective process of communication between your providers, things will fall through the cracks. And that will affect our patient care, which really affects our overall mission statement of we are here to provide the best care possible. So bringing Heroes on board gave me a tool that I could put in on their tool belt and say, guys, it's okay to say this. If you're an EMT, you can tell a paramedic, hey, I don't know if I'd do that. And gives the paramedic the tool to go, you know what? Maybe I should listen to my EMT. He's seeing something I'm not. Years ago, when I started here, if you had a 35-year EMT on the truck, when I started, I had both my partners were here for 35 years as an EMT. I was terrified of them. These guys had been there, done that, and got the t-shirt for being there. And here I am, some young kid coming in. Who am I to tell a 35-year EMT they're wrong? And that made it really, really rough for the first part of my career. With this, now that 35-year EMT is going to have the education, and I'm going to have the education that we can effectively communicate objectively and solve problems together to avoid the mistakes that we've made in the past. So that's what I see.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. Ego slows you down, humility speeds you up. And what Chris really just described there is just that. The fact that EMS has not been around for a long time, it gives us the opportunity to be able to pivot on a dime, to be agile, to be sensitive to the next intersectional innovation, if you will, to where we're combining multiple different innovative factors together to create something brand new. And I think that's what's so powerful inside of EMS is because you have EMTs and paramedics who are eager to be the tip of the spear. And that's exactly what St. Louis City Bureau of EMS has done by being the first EMS agency in the country to actually adopt this training is that they're willing to be able to pivot on the dime and not have any type of commitment necessarily to past practices, but they're sensitive to the needs of the community and they're adjusting to the training based upon that.
Yeah, I
Really
mean,
agree with that.
if you're
Yeah,
not
go ahead.
evolving, you're dying.
Sorry, Chief, didn't mean to cut you off there, but you were in agreement, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. If we don't evolve, then we're basically dead in the water. As an agency leader, I am always looking for ways to evolve my agency to take them to the next level. And EMS is rough because there's two things EMS hates. The way things are, and don't change anything. I hate change. So anytime I go to change anything, I'm dealing with institutional, we've done it, we've always done it this way. And changing that mindset and that uh, culture it's really tough. It's not easy to do that. But once you break the barrier of, well, we've always done it this way into, hey, I just had this idea, Chief. Can we roll with this? You'll see an influx of ideas from your greatest resources, and that is your employees. I mean, I like to tell everybody, I might sit in this office all day long, but it doesn't mean every idea I have is great. So, bring me your ideas. You guys are out there doing this job. And, if it works for you, maybe it'll work for the whole department. And that's kind of, with this project, it worked for law enforcement, it worked for corrections. We all kind of do the same thing. We just meet the people before they do. So why can't we incorporate this into an EMS style format? And it just worked fabulously.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you stated is that, and this, for those of you who don't know Chief Thompson, this is really at the heart of who he is as a person. Like, he is all about his workforce and wants to invest in his workforce. And I think you saw this as another way to invest in your workforce. But one of the key elements about the active bystandership training with Heroes is a focus on promoting employee health and wellness. And this, to peel it back just a little bit, and then I'm curious if you all have thoughts or maybe some examples that have come up either before or since the training that resonate with this, is that St. Louis is not unlike other departments that we work with across the country. They have employee health and wellness resources. They're not being utilized to the extent that we know the need is, right? So the need is here. The resources might match it, but the utilization is, the dip in between. And there's a couple of different reasons for that. I'll be a total psychologist geek here and tell you one thing that the research says is because, we often talk about this stigma, but specifically what the research tells us is that in public safety, there's a stigma for help-seeking behavior. So it's specifically like we're getting better at saying, oh, it's okay not to be okay, and we're offering more resources, but there's still a stigma for help-seeking behavior. And as long as that exists, you're not going to see the utilization that you need. And the power is in the peers, because when peers become more comfortable about saying, hey, you don't seem like yourself, you should get some help, here's our resources. When that becomes a norm in the culture, you will decrease the stigma on help-seeking behaviors and increase the likelihood of people getting treatment. A very non-research but realistic experience in private practice is that people in public safety tend to wait until it's terrible to get help. Actually, we were talking about an example of that before we kicked off the webinar in a physical health way, right? But by the time they come to see mental health professionals, or they're forced to, it's bad, right? It's usually really, really acute, does require a lot of treatment, is wrapped up with other issues. And as a mental health professional, I'm thinking, you did not just show up today and have PTSD. There has been at least 30 days, if not much longer, until we got here. And usually peers, more so than supervisors, more so sometimes even than family members, with a lot of compartmentalizing and hiding things for our family, peers are in the best position to say, hey, Monte, you don't seem like yourself. Like, are you okay? And I'm not a mental health professional, but here's all of our resources. So I think that's something that we're trying to do. Both of you were nodding and resonating with this. What are your thoughts? Or do you have anonymous examples that you can certainly share?
I will tell you right now, we are the worst people ever when it comes for asking for help. We will give help to anybody who calls us, but the tradition of suck it up, it's your job has prevailed EMS through the beginning of it, because we did have a lot of military guys start this out. We've had a lot of fire service background into it. And, everybody's like, oh, you knew what you were getting into when you signed up for this. I'm like, no, you don't. You don't. You don't realize that every day you're going to go see people in the worst day of their life. And those emotions do get to you. I use myself as a prime example. I've got no shame in saying that there's a few times I was running right off that short pier as fast as I could. The mental health of this job will get to you. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And with the stigmata behind the street level bravado and we're tough and we can take this, you can't. So my older guys are the tough ones. I literally have to force help down their throat. The younger generation that has a better understanding of, and I like to joke that my generation didn't have feelings. We forgot to get issued them. But, these people are, the younger generation seems to be more adept at expressing themselves. They still have trouble asking for help too, but with the authority of this program and other things, they now know that they can come forward and say, hey, that call really got to me. And, that 24-hour period post Sentinel event is so critical that we have to intervene in that time. Otherwise, it goes into that file drawer in the back of your head. And you don't really think about it until about 3 o'clock in the morning one night when you're trying to sleep and it comes back and bites you. And if you keep adding baggage and baggage and baggage and baggage, pretty soon you'll find yourself standing in a hole and you can see the light. You just don't know how to get there. So it takes others to come bring that ladder to get you out of that hole. And mental health to me is incredibly important. I have lost three very good friends in this field to suicide. I take it very personally because, my job as the chief is to make sure you go home every night in the best possible condition you can go in. So what keeps me up night and worried is my employees, making sure they're okay.
Yeah. And
And
I think you highlighted a really important point that as the chief, you might be a strong advocate to prevent suicide in your workforce, but you can't be on every shift, every week, every day, 24 hours a day. You need your whole workforce to be aligned. And there isn't a single person that I met at St. Louis Bureau of EMS who isn't aligned in preventing suicide. But what I learned when I was there, which is really common, is there is a lack of comfort in asking directly, are you having thoughts of suicide? And one of the things that active bystandership does is give us the skills to ask, have uncomfortable conversations and intervene, not to be the mental health expert, but to link people to the services that we need or to recognize those early signs as well. Monte, do you have any thoughts you want to add to this?
Yeah, I'll just say what happens when the S on your chest, it doesn't stand for Superman or Superwoman, but it stands for stress. And it becomes obvious to everyone else except you. And a practical example of this is when Dr. Tucker and I, when we were present conducting a 3-day train the trainer, I watched Dr. Tucker walk inside of a room where a lot of individuals were not happy being there. And you can tell that there was some mental gymnastics that they were doing. There you go, folding arms. I mean, crossing their eyes, crossing the nose hairs, everything was crossed, right? And by day 3, literally best friends with some of these individuals who were probably some of the hardest cookies probably to break. Not only does that speak of Dr. Tucker's ability to facilitate, but it also speaks to the power of this curricula. Imagine if that can happen in 3 days. Imagine what can happen over a 12-month period. Because what she really did was she communicated permission to everybody that was present to now have self-discovery and to be able to go on a journey with her over the course of 3 days and see the different light bulb moments that were going off in everybody's heads. I knew that individuals were connecting with the content. That's the real power that we have, not only of active bystandership, but of peer-to-peer intervention.
Thank you, Monty. And I think, because we're focused on the pilot, I do want to share some experiences from that and kind of lessons learned. One of the key things that we talk about when we bring our curriculum to any agency is that connection matters more than competency. We're all very competent in active bystandership and our strong curriculum, but we make a point to get there early. We connect with people personally. I stayed an extra day and did some ride-alongs and drove with people around to different places in the city and got to see that Chief Thompson should not become an actor in his next life. We did some role plays, but yeah, I mean, I got to see the new buses being delivered, and I got to learn about people who they are. And that's one of the things that can be forgotten in this line of work is that a lot of trainings just come down and say, learn, 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 right? Here's the information, memorize it, spit it back out again, and don't screw it up. And our philosophy is really that we want people to have self-awareness and self-discovery and learn some new skills. And we watch people absorb that over 3 days. And I think you said something that's true, which is I don't think I've ever walked into a room and the whole room is like, can't wait to be here. There's always at least one person who was fallen ordered, who makes it clear. But my experience is those people, they're actually your most valuable, because the reason they are usually the most curmudgeon about being there is because they've seen it all. They know what the real problems are in the department, and they think this is another rubber stamp. Fair enough feedback. And so they usually come around to saying, oh, okay, like you actually really want to see good things happen here, which we do. One of the takeaways that I had, though, and I want to kind of just get both of your thoughts on that. Something I thought you did very strategically, Chief, is that you had one person from the fire department attend the pilot. So we were piloting for EMS. Our model, we have 3 models essentially. We have one for EMS, one for fire, and then we have a cross-trained one. So when we're doing both audiences, we've got those. We of course brought the EMS module to you guys. But you had I'm going to pull in somebody from the fire department, and I would love to hear your why for doing so. And Monte, I'd love if you could share, like, there were some lessons learned that we heard from that individual who did speak up and share with us their thoughts. And yeah, but Chief, that was your initiative to have them observe train the trainer. And what was your thought behind that?
So I cheated a little bit. So he used to be on EMS, so I've known him for quite a while. But he's also one of those people that I know think outside of the box. He does not think in a linear method. He is always thinking outside of the box, and he finally got into a position where he could affect change and kind of move things through the suppression side. So when I approached him with it, his initial response was, well, I don't know. I might be really busy. And I'm like, no, you really need to come from this. Okay. And I kind of threw the at him a little bit, and he was skeptical. But 2 days into it, he came up and he's like, we have to have this on the fire department. And less than 48 hours ago, we're standing on the back lot at fire headquarters, and he brought it up to me. He's like, hey, I know you guys are doing active bystander heroes in January. When can we do it on the fireside? And I'm like, well, let's sit down and start planning this, because it's pretty easy to do 150 people, but to add another 650 to it, it's going to take a little bit more planning. So he's still 100% sold for it. So I think my real ace in the hole is I've got a really good training officer, an EMS training officer, that he took this like a game-winning touchdown and ran with it. I mean, just absolutely 100% invested. He doesn't know it yet. He's going to find out right now because I see him on, but he's going to be the spear point for this. I want you to take this and I want you to run with it as far as you can go. My job will be to support you, to get you what you need. And then we're going to work on getting the suppression side, because we've got the buy-in from the upper levels of the academy. And I actually had a really good conversation with the fire chief about it. And he's like, huh, sounds interesting. Let's do it. So, I think once they figure out what it is, yeah, that's you. Once you figure out what it's about and what it can do, you don't have to really sell it too hard. It's just a matter of making that decision to pull the trigger on it and get it going. And like I said, I chose some of the biggest naysayers on my department for the specific reason is I had a feeling that they would be my champions. And if the grouchy guys that poo-poo everything come out and they're wound up about it, the rest of your teams and the rest of your crews are going to jump on it all in because they're going to be like, wait, he hates everything. And he's excited about this. We got to go see what this is. This guy doesn't smile about anything. He's talking about it and running around about it. You
And
know?
he even volunteered to do a recorded video vignette, which was amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I actually, he came up to me the third day and I'm like, who are you? And what did you do with your former self? And he said, I've never seen you this excited about something. And he goes, well, you've never put anything this cool in front of me. So, when I get feedback back like that from, my people, I'm like, okay, we made a good decision here. Now we really have to press it and run with it.
Yeah, Monty, some of the things that I remember from the gentleman who attended from the suppression side, certainly because he was getting the full EMS module, he didn't see our fire module or our combined semantics, make total sense scenarios and things like that. But he also, like, I remember had some feedback for us about how you would roll it out, kind of like who to include, and it was interesting because my perception at the time was I think it's the same. It just feels different because you have a different structure, right? But you have this experience. You've done police, you've done EMS, you've worked in public safety. Like I think sometimes people have the perception that they're uniquely different, but our perception often when we go between cultures is they have more in common than they realize.
Yeah, I mean that is so true. I mean, just because we all fall under the great umbrella of public safety, a lot of times people don't see the small individual parts that are moving. So I agree that we have so much more in common because of the types of emergency situations we find ourselves in. But when it comes to the training, I think it's going to be strategic because oftentimes, the firefighters, they have a certain culture. EMS, we have a certain culture. And I think it was very helpful to have somebody from both sides who understands the culture, but also, like Chris said, who's in a position to be able to do something about it in terms of having influence. I think that's key. And, I appreciate him for coming out and being a part of and being an observer, but also taking the next step to be able to have you have that introductory meeting to the chief of the fire department and to those deputies who were going to be involved in the initial rollout for the fire side too. So I think it was very strategic.
Yeah, well done. I actually have a little bit of a so one of the other things for folks to know is that we're going to be doing a follow-up a year from now because part of our work is that we do a pre-implementation survey and a one-year follow-up implementation survey. And so the chief, as he mentioned, they're rolling out January 1st for their sole agency. So that will be pre-implementation survey and then a post, and we'll see kind of what happens. But one of the things that we observe in Heroes to date with our other organizations is that the 1 year post data shows us that people's skills and confidence increase, that they actually are practicing more bystandership, but it's predominantly with peers, right? So usually a year out, we see an increase in active bystandership. Fantastic, that's what we want. But the next level up is with leaders, right? And which makes sense because it's harder to intervene on leaders. And we spend a lot of time in the training talking about why it's hard to intervene. But one of I guess, the questions that I have for you, Chief, is, well, actually, let me do this way because where I'm going to is what we find is that frequency matters more than duration. And so we were there on site to do train the trainer, but you did something with Neo and then you're rolling it out agency wide. And I'm wondering if you could talk about that because one of the things that I observe is it strategically does some frequency in dosing around what this concept is. And that really builds for us to come in later in the year and help with like a reinforcement module. But yeah, tell us a little bit about what are you all doing in Neo that's in addition to what they'll get in the full training.
So I can't take 100% credit for the NEO, our new employee orientation. One of the trainers decided that I like this, I'm going to train him in it. We had discussions about it, but it wasn't, hey, Chief, can I do this? It's, hey, I'm going to do this. And I went, do it, go for it. I'm not going to stop anybody from doing something effective. So, it's really neat. And I kind of see it in the newer employees that have been through the new employee orientation or NEO that have this training versus a year ago, the people that I hired that still, there's still that communication barrier. And I ask all the new guys, hey, how did you like it? What did you think of it? And to a person, they're all like, wow, we have never heard of anything like that. We've never had anything like that, but that was cool. So I think that upfront education is absolutely essential. I firmly believe that as an agency, it's our job to build foundational education. So, I have to give my employees a great foundation to build off of. And in new employee orientation, that's one of the things we focus on is those foundational areas. And if we incorporate heroes into that foundation, and then throughout the year we expand on that, you don't have that typical lapse you see after about 6 months of any other type of didactic education or anything like that. It's, oh yeah, I remember you telling me about that, but I kind of forgot because it's been so long. So, that the frequency is absolutely important, but I think the other biggest issue is incorporating it into your culture. You have to be able to shift gears and say, no, suck it up is not our culture. Our culture is we recognize you need help. You need to know that you can ask for help. And our job is to make sure you get that help whenever you ask for it. Even if you don't think you need it, come in, talk about it. One of the things did very early on here before Heroes is anytime one of our crews went through a sentinel event, with pediatrics or, nasty traumas or something like that, my supervisors go out and meet them at the hospital. Hey, are you guys okay? Let's talk about it. Let's hot wash this call. What went right? What could we improve on? And it was the opening of those communications lines that really segue into what Heroes does is just takes that to a different level and gives that employee the tool to talk back and open up to their supervisor and know that, hey, I learned in class that I can say something
Yeah.
and nobody's going to look down on me for this. I'm having a human reaction to a very human situation.
Yeah,
And
that's
then
the thing.
bring resources in.
You normalize, right? You normalize being human, right? And Monty kind of mentioned this earlier is that we as humans are we are our own worst enemy and seeing our own biases, including when we need help. We actually don't. We need peers to do that for us. I want to kind of walk that walk because I do appreciate that, the hot wash analogy. I'd love to hear from both of you. What is one thing that we could have done differently, better? And maybe it's just hindsight, right? Well, now on the tail end of it, we could have done more of this beforehand, or maybe this could have been handled differently. Any kind of certainly at Heroes, we want to walk the walk about accepting feedback. And we really want to normalize that sometimes, unless you ask the question, what could have been done differently? How could we make it better? You won't know. And that weakness could get stronger without having any attention paid to it. While you're both thinking about the answer to that, I want to highlight something else that was really positive that happened while we were there. We connected with your medical director, who also had a very strategic passion for this work and for bringing this forward for lots of different reasons. I had a great conversation with him and really walked away with a real appreciation for what a challenging role the medical director of an EMS team is, and why, as a medical director, you would want your team to have exactly what you stated, Chief. Lots of training, support, and the ability to intervene when you see a potential mistake happening. But do either of you, in that question, like what could have gone better, or hindsight or improvement, does anything come to mind for the Heroes pilot?
I talked to everybody that went through that and asked that very question. And I think the problem is they were just so excited about it, they couldn't come up with anything yet. Now, and being the first EMS agency to get it, the excitement, which is still there, is running rampant. And as we get deeper into it, we're probably going to say, well, maybe we should have done it this way. This way might have worked better, or don't change a thing. Abby hit the nail on the head. So, like I said, it's still early for us, but like I said, everybody coming out of that class, um, I didn't hear a single complaint about it. Well, after day one, everybody's like, can we do 4 days of this?
It's
So,
funny, people are always like 3 days, and I have to say, every time I'm like, I wish I had more time because there were deep conversations that people wanted to have, right, Monty? Like we regularly are like, wow, y'all, this is such a good conversation, and we got to keep moving here on our curriculum. I mean, people really cracked open and started having, and wish you had more time. But Monty, how
Yeah.
about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm similar to Chris. I mean, nothing stands out immediately. I think if anything, the like you mentioned, the deep conversations, allowing those to marinate a lot more. Because as soon as people's guards came down and they were very expressive and they were sharing not only directly from the heart, but you can tell that they were making the connection with the material. And so I think overall it's a great job that was done with facilitating and moderating those conversations because it's not easy to get us as public safety professionals to let our guards down in essence to a complete stranger and kind of share some of the challenges that we're experiencing as we're connecting with the content. So nothing immediately will stand out for me that we've could have done better. I agree with you. I wish we had more time we could have actually spent with the crew because I mean they were just fantastic.
there you go. That's my complaint. It should have been 4 days.
There you go. Well, and actually, I've thought a lot about this. I think our feedback is in line. There's two things that I would have done differently. Besides, I wish I had more time, but that the time thing is always hard because I know that that means overtime. I mean, that's hard, right? 3 days is still a lot of time. Number one, I wish we would have had an EMT in the group. I wish we would have had one EMT because to bring that culture forward in it, you were, I think, strategic in selecting leaders, which made a ton of sense. I did have the chance though to chat with your EMTs while I was there. So shout out to Beasley who for showing me around the truck and great EMT. And I chatted to a couple of the others when we were doing the training. They were all fantastic, and they gave me some great feedback. So I had that was benefit of doing some ride-alongs and connecting with them for sure.
And I'll take the hit on that. That was my short side by not including EMTs. Because when we were first doing this, I'm thinking, okay, who are my trainers? Who are my trainers? And just because I'm the chief doesn't mean I'm the brightest bulb in the box. I blew that one. That was a
Well, you
big,
didn't blow it,
yeah,
but this is like why we're here, right? Like, what would people do
yeah.
differently,
I
and
mean, I would
what
include
power?
all licensures and make sure you cover all of your ranges of experience.
Mm,
Oldest guy to your youngest guy. Everybody brings something to the table in a situation like this. The older guys are going to bring a lot of experience, a lot of institutional knowledge, some good, some bad. The new guys are going to come in like a blank piece of paper. They have ideas. They have, they're probably the more passionate of the two because they're new. They haven't
yeah,
run 100,000 calls yet. But connecting those two generations and those two experience levels together, I think will give you a really good litmus of what your entire department is at. And like I said, it was my mistake for not throwing my Beasleys or some of my other high performing EMTs into that class to show exactly what I've been preaching is even if you're an EMT, you do have the authority to say something. So, if there's something that would change in the initial class, it would have been on my end to get more of those people into this class.
yeah.
And
Fun.
that was my short-sightedness, and we all learn from our mistakes.
Well, and I would actually offer a couple of things. First of all, this is exactly why we're doing this webinar. Like, what are the lessons learned? And so now, for so many other agencies will benefit. Now I can say, no, I'm telling you, the chief in St. Louis, if he could, that's the one thing he would do differently, and that's power in that. The other thing I would say is that I don't know that we explicitly stated that. I think that was for me, like once I was in the room, I was like, oh, I understand now. So I don't know if it was so much a mistake as a you were going off of I need my trainers and leaders and breadth of experience. And then we get in there, it's like, oh, right, there's like, how do we do this? And so lesson learned. I love to tease right now, just because I've gotten to know you, that I know that if an employee was that hard on themselves, you'd be saying, don't be so hard on yourself. It's fine, we move forward. But man, you are really hard on yourself, Chief.
I don't expect perfection, but I always want to strive towards it. And on
Yeah.
that also, don't just isolate yourself to your street crews.
Yeah.
Your management has to be in line with this program because you got to have that buy-in from the top. Your management, they're setting the tone, they're setting the pace, they're setting the direction your organization is going. So, you know, I should have had my deputy chiefs. I had a couple supervisors in there. Those are my street leaders.
Yeah.
But, I should have had both my deputies in that class because they're the ones that oversee both of those shifts and they can point that direction that I want everybody to go. So don't just think, oh, this is just a street guy thing. This is an institutional, everybody needs to be involved in this.
Yeah, and I really appreciate the reminder that, something we say a lot in Heroes is it's got to be the top down, bottom up, and outside in and inside out. And the other thing I want to highlight that you did that I think was unique is that most of the other departments we're working with now, we're going to come in and we're going to be training fire and EMS. And sometimes that's collaboratively, sometimes that's separately. And you kind of pull the rabbit out of your hat and we're like, how about I just go do EMS and then we can bring fire on later. And I want to highlight that there's no one path. And I think that you've modeled that it could happen this way as well. I think something that aligns with fire and EMS is the eagerness for good quality training. That's something that I think both cultures have in mind for sure. But the other thing that I am kicking myself for, and this is totally with me, is that one thing I would have done differently is have some virtual time before and scheduled after to connect with those agency instructors. And I think that probably that's mostly coming from my desire to have that more time, but to have had even just 1 hour with them a week or two before we came out would have, I think, been helpful. And then to have a schedule time. I mean, I know I can reach out to them now and schedule something and do it, but if it was committed and like in their calendars, this is the date and time, I think part of that might be just coming from my desire to connect with them because they're all such great humans. But I do think some of that is coming from a lesson learned that the more we pull out that frequency and we give people time, I think one of you said this, like time to marinate, time to just sit on it, think on it, and then come back and be able to ask questions. So I think that's something that we'll build in as we go forward is really having more structure around that.
Yeah, and as much as I wanted to literally roll this program out 24 hours after everybody finished it, I wanted to give my instructors the time to sit back and go, this is how I'm going to do this. This is the tools I'm going to need. You know, give them time to really soak that stuff in. I know a couple of them have gone back and reread the entire curriculum. They've gone over everything you guys have given them, and their brains are just going 100 miles an hour. So, giving them, it's a 3 month window before we really kick this off, but carry the message of heroes to your department. And how you do that is very department specific. So
Sure.
figure out what works best for your department. I would love to be able to pull every employee in at once and do it all at once, but then there'd be nobody out there running calls. So we have to be very strategic in how we bring people in, get them trained, verify the training, ensure they receive quality training, and that requires a lot of pre-planning.
It
So
does.
that's one of the things I worry about. I'd also like to, I forgot to mention this earlier. The funny thing about bringing our suppression member in is really not finding out how different we are, but how like our cultures are.
Yeah.
It's just we have a different job. We all want the same thing. We all believe in the same thing. We're all here for the same reason. We just use different toys to accomplish our mission. And I think, uh, especially in a split department where one half the department does EMS and one half the department does fire,
Mm.
there's historically a wall there. And I think this is a bridge over that wall to a better understanding of we really are one team. We all have the same mission. We just use different toys to complete the task. And I've seen that starting. And
Nice.
ironically enough, after Heroes, these individuals that went through that are opening up more to their coworkers in the engine houses. So,
Nice.
we built the excitement on EMS. The guys took it back out into the field and they're at their home stations because we base all our ambulances out of firehouses. And they start talking about it to their crews, and the crews are going, "What'd you guys get?" And the other advantage I have is if I give EMS something that the firemen don't get, they go, "Hey, wait a second. We want that too." So a little healthy competition goes a long way.
Yep. I'm laughing. Monty and I are sharing a look because Monty totally called that. He was like, you know what's going to happen, Abigail, is that we're bringing a cool, shiny training and then they're all just going to want it. I was like, well, I'm happy for that. But
Yeah.
I was also very impressed with that was some of the deeper conversations that we had was really thinking, how am I going to put this into play? And then realizing that your best bet is to go and practice and start. We're coming up on time. I know we had Chief Spencer put something in the comment. I know he's left already, but we're heading out to Suffield, Connecticut in February 2026 and bringing Heroes out. And they're actually unique because they are predominantly, their ambulance crew is, I think, predominantly volunteer. And so they have a lot of volunteer in their ambulance and their fire department. And so we're doing a mixed paid and volunteer. So that will be great to see how we roll that out. Actually, it was very cool, Chief Thompson, because some of your folks used to work in departments like that, and they gave us some feedback about how to make sure that that works. We are going to have the recording of this up on our YouTube channel coming within the next week or so. So for folks to know that, and you might see some clips coming out on social media of these wisdom nuggets that got dropped here today. But you can find all of us on LinkedIn. You can find more about Heroes on our website. You can find more about Monty on his website. And we would love to hear from you. If you have questions and we didn't get to it today, please reach out to us. Again, Monty and James, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And like I said, it was the most fun I've had in a while being out there and riding along with the crew. St. Louis EMS, they know how to host and they knocked that out of the park. So I can't wait to come back.
The
That's
invitation
awesome.
will always be there.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Happy
Great.
Thanksgiving, everyone.
Yes, and happy
As well.
Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.